Hello everybody, and good morning! Welcome to a quick start guide to the Armored Core series, specifically on the PSP. So first of all, obvious question, it's kind of getting off the bat here. Why are we talking about the PSP version? Isn't the PS2 version the same? And not quite. So basically, when they were ported over to the PSP, they fixed a bunch of things, they added a bunch of things, and they changed a few things. First of all, there's actually one thing that I've recently seen somebody new to the AC series kind of running into, which is the fact that in the original, when you looked at a stat screen, you have things like, like for example, if cooling or certain values had gone up or down. If it was up, it was blue. If it was down, it was red. However, in cases where, for example, the calorific value on a generator, basically how much heat it generates passively, like generally speaking, the lower that value, the better. However, in the original, it basically said, hey, weight's going up, that's fantastic, calorific value going up, beautiful, it's all blue and great and everything. But that confused a lot of folks, but, I mean, it wasn't too much of a detriment. But in the PSP version, yeah, they just kind of downscaled the graphics a little bit, they added a whole bunch of new arena fights for the 3 games that they ported, and additionally added a whole bunch of parts that folks had wanted for a little bit, stuff from first-gen Armored Core and all that kind of thing. Just neat little things to fill in the gaps. So overall, I'd say that if you're looking for a version of AC to play these days, just do the PSP version. As far as what was taken out, you actually already saw some of it in this cutscene, which is that in the original, sometimes when you drove by, you kind of like ran by windows or boosted past them, the pressure from your boosters would cause the windows to shatter. So little effects like that were taken out, except for a couple places. There's actually a couple missions you can still do it. And there's occasionally, like, skybox stuff, but whatever. Anyway, so, PSP versions, definitely some of my favorite games of all time. I would say AC3 is probably my second favorite game ever. And this thing is amazing! Alright, let's just get into the game proper. So this guide is entirely for folks that are just kind of getting into this. I would personally recommend starting with AC3 if you're starting the AC series at all. It's probably the best paced of all of them, but again, that's just personal opinion. Now, first thing you want to do, you see this background music slider? That sucker is going all the way to max because the music is amazing in this game. Sound effects, voices, whatever you want there. Text messages, I mean, it's good to have data. Main difference between normal and hard difficulty is just going to be the size of your lockbox as well as the health of certain enemies. Now I say certain enemies because there's certain cases where you fight other Armored Core units, which basically are just other mechs like yourself. And normally on normal they will come in partially damaged because they've had to make their way to that mission, and on hard they come in completely brand new, nobody touched them on their way in. So, I'll sum up the premise of the story. Basically, humanity is a complete write-off of a species, and we cannot seem to take care of the world whatsoever. So it's basically ended anywhere between 1 to 5 times at this point, depending on how you want to count it. And so we're living in a giant underground bunker. Now, wait a minute. Weird coffee guy, there's stars in the sky right now. What's going on with that? Well, everybody lives under an artificial sky. In fact, it's even the name of the title theme. It's actually, I think it's Artificial Sky 3 that's currently playing in the background right now. Now, you are basically a random dude doing their job. There's so many different corporate wars and whatever else that, functionally speaking, mercenaries in modular mechs are more or less just a normal thing. So there's different versions of all kinds of different things. Since it is a very common occupation for people just to be, fighting for corporate interests and giant robots, there's different versions of different robots in this game. So like MTs are just the standard jobber grunt kind of situations, become specialized for a particular job, and then if somebody's able to get their qualification, they become a Raven or somebody that pilots in AC. Basically, this just means that they get the fancy version that's got all the customization options. So basically, they're slightly bigger. Canonically, they've kind of ranged from 5 to 10 meters tall, depending on what game we're looking at. There's a whole lot of weird stuff to the story. It's kind of like Souls, which is fitting because it's the same people that made it, so like the Souls games. But yeah, that's kind of the general gist of this thing. Now, you might have noticed there's a few different mechanics going on here. You might be thinking that you're a giant armored mech, your first thing should be to run towards stuff. first thing you need to learn to appreciate is your trigger buttons. So these will make you strafe left and right. And additionally, you might notice this weird boosting pattern I'm doing, as well as this meter on the left. So when you're boosting, you use this energy meter, the contents of that meter, how well it functions, whatever else. That's going to be entirely a function of your internals and things like that. You've got pretty much free movement as far as all that goes, but energy is going to determine how that works. On the top left, you have your AP, which is your health. Below that, you have your heat, and then below that, you have any allies. So, okay, simple enough so far. As far as your general movement goes, generally moving side to side and bunny hopping like that is going to be a good enough kind of general maneuver throughout most of the game. Think of it a little bit like, you know how you see boxers and fighters and whatever else, and they're usually like hopping back and forth on their feet? That's basically what bunny hopping is in this game. It just keeps you moving and makes you able to immediately jump to a kind of dodging position, so to speak. Now, the first mechanic that you run into after your intro right here is your mailbox. This might seem like nothing, but this is where you get new parts. This is where you get told what's going on in the world. It's like, as far as world building and whatever else, from the way that the other AC pilots act to the way that your emails go and things like that, this is some of the best world building I've ever seen in a game, full stop. It's really, really good. And like everything, the thing is, everything about the mechanics and system in AC3 all kind of boil down to the fact that all of it is world building. Right? Like let me show you something right here. Let's go ahead and go over to the buy menu. And we're going to go over what the different parts do in kind of vague general order as we go. But okay, like, we have two companies, the two main companies that are introduced right here. And you immediately see their two philosophies in the products that they're providing. You have Crest. They can functionally be seen as the Ford of this universe. And basically, they build cheap, affordable parts that pretty much anybody can get access to. They're generally functional. They will do whatever you need them to do. In fact, most of your starting equipment is produced by them, because every function of your starting AC here is built to be cheap. You can see you've got a generator that barely works, you've got a radiator that barely works, you've got an FCS that's very basic. The FCS is your fire control system, basically the computer that handles your targeting. Your booster is basically an old retro model, and then every part of this says that it's standard and inexpensive. And yeah, it's all blocky. Every part that comes from Crest is just blocky, square, you know, old Transformers looking thing. But it's cheap. Everybody can afford it. And you may notice, looking at your gear, like they do provide every piece of equipment that you have because it's all cheap. Funnily enough, this radar later became a Mirage part, I believe. Anyway, so okay, fair enough. You know, they built the cheap thing, you start off in a cheap thing, sure, but how's that relevant? Well, because they're the ones that want you to always use cheap stuff. So like right here, the purpose of this thing is to try to, like, let's say, reduce on your overall costs. So overall, the biggest thing you're going to be fighting most of the time is going to be shell. So like bullets, missiles, that kind of thing. Every one of their cores is going to be better at dealing with shell. Additionally, when it comes to missiles, which are going to be doing a bit more damage, you may notice at the very bottom, all of their cores are built with a inbuilt anti-missile system, meaning that they're essentially getting a cheap, I mean, it doesn't really work very well, but there's a chance that it will just eat missiles that are coming your way. So it's made to be able to have you move around faster, because it's got this overboost thing. That's actually what I was showing off a few seconds ago, that it can allow you to move real fast, but a lot of the innards of the core are dedicated to this anti-missile thing. Then we have our second company, which is Mirage. They do the fancy stuff. They build all of the like high-tech equipment. They are functionally the Apple of this universe. Theirs, like right here, instead of letting you boost very fast, instead of shooting down missiles for you, has a drone that will pop out of the back of it to shoot stuff that is around you. This also has a similar function over here. These are not entirely just locked to companies in that way, but you may notice that, yeah, you're less likely to run into energy stuff, but it may do more to you. But you may notice they've got better energy defense on their parts. So anything blocky is better at bullets, anything rounded is better against lasers. So here's the thing though. Every part in this menu, I won't go through each particular category or whatever else. But just know, when it says what it says on the bottom right, the product description, that is going to be an accurate descriptor for what that part does. That doesn't mean it is the only thing that part does. Actually, every part in this game has a whole bunch of different things that can matter under different circumstances. Like, for example, let's look at the arms. So reaction speed is just how quickly the arm will react to whatever command you put in. Like, recoil control is fairly obvious. It's for, like, when you're firing full auto. Or energy supply, which is how quickly it can get energy to a laser blade, in case that happens to be the thing that you're going for. And you've got all kinds of different options here. So these are going to be all over the place, but a few things that people tend to miss relatively often, kind of coming into this thing for the first time. Inside parts and extension parts, these are essentially just little gadgets you can build into your AC. You won't do these at the very start, but these tend to fill out your build pretty darn well, so just don't forget that those exist. Second thing, there's oftentimes a thought over whether you should be upgrading generators or radiators or what. Most of it comes down to something very simple. If you don't have energy, just upgrade your generator a little bit. They all do different things, but essentially on the top end you're going for cheap, on the bottom end you're going for high performance, and usually that high performance will come at the cost of heat or weight, whereas on the radiator they'll usually come at the cost of energy drain or weight. So basically, one will tax the other. They kind of balance themselves out like that. Don't worry too much about heat. Like, generally speaking, something middle of the line for radiators will do you for most of the game. There's more specific circumstances, sure. Just don't worry about it too much. But yeah. As far as defenses are concerned, because this one also comes up pretty often for newer players, usually what you're seeing is, on most builds, you'll have defenses for energy and shell that are roughly going to average out around the 1500 range per each one. As far as your total defense goes, that can be a little hard to tell sometimes, because if we look over on the right side, all it says is defensive points. So this generally means that for AC3 in particular, it basically will just tell you, hey, you're close to 3000, neat. So if you're under 3,000, you're probably a little bit low on defense. If you're above it, you're probably okay. But just kind of think of it as each part is adding a little bit to that particular defensive style there. Most of the time, you need shell defense. Sometimes you need energy defense. Don't really worry about it too much. You know, start off just building something that looks cool, and you can refine it from there. Usually it's one of these games that's best played, that you run into a problem, you fix it, and then you just kind of roll from there. As far as weapons, they will all function very differently. You may have heard, you know, this, that, or the other is just this amazing OP thing. How could they put it in the game? I'm not talking about the flamethrower in particular, by the way. Funnily enough, largely only used for speedruns, but yeah, the weapons are something that you really want to experiment with a few exceptions, and that's what I'm going to bring up now. Because they're all going to have their own little roles and their own little fun niches to play around with. Like, for example, energy weapons don't cost you any ammo, meaning that you'll get more money when you go out on missions, because what determines how you actually gain money in this game is entirely going to be determined on how fast you complete a mission, how efficiently you complete it, and how many optional objectives you've completed. So if you take damage, you get less money. If you spend a lot of money and run around with a bunch of bazookas, you're gonna lose money. So yes, it is partially an economics game. Now, the one weapon I'm gonna bring up here for newbies to not try to go for, because this will probably be a really annoying experience, is the parry blades. So I mentioned before, you can sell for the same price that you buy. You'll probably immediately sell these things, because it is, functionally speaking, a spike you put on your arm. It's like a pneumatic gauntlet kind of thing, with a decent amount of power behind it. The problem is, it also causes you to overheat when you fire it, whether you hit or not. It also has very low ammo capacity, and additionally, they are incredibly difficult to actually hit anything with. They are, however, fantastic for a challenge run. On the left side of things, I will bring up a few things about shields, because they are not just simply better shield is better defense. So, I mentioned before, every part in this game is essentially geared for some niche, rather than being like one is a direct upgrade over the other, unless it particularly says so. So they're all going to be good at something. It'll vary what that something actually is. So we look at the top here, we see that this top one is going to be pretty good in terms of general defense. It's pretty lightweight, doesn't really drain very much. It's basically just a cheap, you want a defensive item kind of situation. You got something like this, though, and you notice looking at its stats at the bottom, it is going to be fairly decent. Like, it has almost double the heat insulation of this one. It also has more than double the heat insulation of this one, meaning that more than likely this is the one you're probably going to go for if you are having trouble with something overheating you with a cannon or something. Would I recommend using shields at all for first playthrough? Not really, but if it's your thing, if that's where you're used to, you'll probably love it. Meanwhile, this one's just kind of generally higher defense, and you might notice it says shield coverage. So, similarly to something like Dark Souls or whatever else, they are pretty anal about their hitboxes, meaning that this thing just basically has a higher hitbox for which it can block things. Alright, moving on. Optional parts, these are basically expansions that you can put into everything. They're kind of all over the dang place. I believe we already covered those to some degree. Yeah, legs are going to have all kinds of different functions. You know, bipeds are fairly standard. Heavyweights are going to be a heavier standard. Chicken legs have better energy conservation characteristics to them and let you jump higher. You've got quads that let you walk around and fire cannons, but they make you a little bit easier to hit. You've got tanks that are going to make you just easier to hit in general, but you can tank a bunch of hits, and you've got like heavy, light, hover, whatever variants of these. You've got hover legs that are basically lightweight, but they're very fast. But they also make you very easy to hit with those gigantic wings or sides, depending on which ones you end up using. So, basically, World's your oyster. Go nuts with all the different kinds of parts and whatever else. Now, there's a bunch of stuff you can do early on to essentially optimize your game, so to speak. There's a whole bunch of ways you can get a bunch of hidden parts just within your first few minutes. I made a video a while ago on the fact that you can basically make a overpowered S-ranking build within 10 minutes of actually starting the game. Again, it's a FromSoft game. It's going to have that kind of stuff. But just in terms of overall mechanics, I mentioned earlier that the bunny hopping was going to be a bit of an important thing, and yeah, just experimenting with parts is going to be your kind of biggest thing there. Don't worry too much about the specifics, but like, don't get too carried away over breakpoints, over what does this, that, or the other. Just try a part. Hey, this part worked better for this. Normally, I would recommend that you don't miss this mission right here. So defend the arena. The reason for this is because this is a fantastic introduction to how a lot of different things in this game work. And actually, it's fully fine in your starting AC here, because for one thing, it tells you, hey, a lot of stuff is going to have missiles. Also, there's a decent chance that those missiles will dud out on account of your core, because you probably still have this core. There is a way that you can afford a better core by this point, but whatever. You can see there's a ton of different enemy types and different enemy heights, and the fact that their height might actually matter. As far as dodging and things, yeah, just generally moving left and right works pretty well. And it actually ends up feeling pretty intuitive when it comes to this control scheme, because you're usually sitting and waiting for something to lock anyway. Another thing that you may have seen come up a couple times is the laser blade here, which you may notice right there. If you're in the air, you can basically lock on with the thing. Now this is on account of I keep repeatedly getting hit in the middle of my swinging animation, so we're going to get rid of these guys and their bazooka shells so that they stop doing that. But you can blade stuff at any point. This will do a sort of upward slash if you're on the ground, and if you're in the air, it'll take a swing in the air. Just so you know, where you hit with that thing actually matters. So the closer you are to something's kind of core, so to speak, the better you'll do, which means that when you're locking onto somebody in mid-air, there's a decent chance that you'll actually do a lot of extra damage that way. So just kind of like mini optimization on that one. And yeah, your starting AC is pretty slow, but something like that. It's not going to be the biggest difference until you end up getting, you know, better blades and things, and there's a chance that you probably won't even stick with blades through most of the game. But it was basically the series standard up to this point, so that's kind of just something that's been there. Now, don't worry too much if you can't dodge everything. Honestly, if you just win the mission, you're usually going to be just fine. AC3 is pretty forgiving. Even on hard mode, it's really not that big of a deal. That's what actually makes it incredibly fun for challenge runs, because you can make incredibly terrible builds. Actually, there's one in particular that I think I'll show as an example. Just because they actually have a bit of an in-joke with regards to one of the characters. It's somebody that you'll encounter later in the story, even. But probably until like a fourth or fifth playthrough, whenever you're familiar with all the mechanics of it, there may be a decent chance they may not even notice it's the same guy. And that's kind of the beauty of this game. Every single thing, from how all the different parts are designed and kind of their roles in mind and whatever else, their weird drawbacks, all of it ends up serving as world building. It's very rare that you see a game go this hard into making everything part of the world. Like these ACs right here, or these MTs, sorry, you'll have several cases where you'll end up actually potentially allowing pilots of those to actually upgrade to ACs, depending on different actions throughout the game. They don't ever make a big deal out of it. It's just like, hey, so that worked out pretty well. Turns out it was enough to qualify for getting an AC, so basically in this world, instead of student loans, you just sort of qualify for, like, I don't know, I think the default value of the starter AC is like $219K or something. So you just basically qualify to get financed for an AC, and then you just kind of go from there. And I just love the setting of this game. It's so weird. Like right here. You know, we didn't do terribly well, but we still made a profit, so that works. As far as what you're losing and whatever else in different fights, usually you're going to see a breakdown a bit like this. So you're probably losing about half your health, give or take, per mission, and then losing a decent bit of your ammunition. Now, as I mentioned before, if you go on missions with only energy weapons, then you don't have to worry about costs. So, for example, the blade there is an energy weapon. Let's go ahead and take this other mission here, where there's a Union strike, and apparently we're just not having that. By the way, did I mention that this is kind of a dark universe? Because it totally is. Kind of a minor mechanic that you may not be aware of. If you select your camera control buttons, or, I mean, I guess this is a weapon combination, or a button combination that'll vary. But if you can actually purge any weapons that you don't want to keep around. You don't lose anything for their ammo costs. They're just dropped and presumably picked up later. So because this generator's pretty terrible, we're going to go ahead and just walk over to these guys. But as you saw there, that one only took one hit because I ended up getting a decent hit with the blade. It actually doesn't hit just once, it hits multiple times. And I believe it's the number of frames that the laser is connecting with certain parts of their hitbox that determines the damage, something like that. Basically, you hit in the air, it looks cooler, it does more damage. That's really what you need to know about that. It's not like it's going to be an instant kill against most things. It's just a flat damage value that it's doing, and those just don't happen to have very much health.
That's all of them. Let's head out.
So what I wanted to show there, you may have noticed on the top left that heat meter is going up. I used the overboost twice, which was overheating the AC. It is the only type of movement in AC3 that will, well actually it's one of two types of movement that will cause you to generate heat. The other one, as you saw there, we have no ammo costs, so there's that. The other one is the parry blade I was talking about earlier, which does cause you to generate heat when it's used. And in fact, you know what, just to save folks the heartache of trying that thing and being disappointed by it, we're just going to go ahead and show it off right here. Let's get the Sprux. And we'll go ahead and do the first arena fight just for the hell of it. So I'll just go ahead and dissuade you of this notion right now. Because there's always going to be that one guy of like, I had to. You told me not to and I had to. But yeah, when I'm offering advice in this one, it is genuinely from a place of I just want you to be able to enjoy this game. And yeah, a parry blade is not the way to do it. Interesting little world-building note here, by the way. A dew here. And you'll notice for many of the NPCs and whatnot, But Adieu basically took the starter AC, and he decided that it would be a great idea to sell his missile launcher for upgraded legs. And you'll notice that economically, that's what a lot of them do. That they actually do follow their backstory to determine what they had access to, which is pretty fun. And usually, if there's an exception, there's a reason for it. Now, this guy is the worst in the entire arena. He is the worst AC that you can ever fight. Now, granted, he's incredibly resistant to shell damage, which is what this thing is considered, but you can kind of see why it would be a little bit of a problem to attempt to use this thing on any practical basis. Now then, if we go ahead and compare that with the standard, laser blade gear that you start with, it's in a hand that does not contain a gun, you'll see that, yeah, it's basically comparable. It's way faster to actually deploy, it locks on, and is generally a far better time to use. Now, granted, I am playing this on a Vita currently, so I will say the sticks are not exactly ideal for this, but whatever. Actually, that is kind of a funny thing. If you're playing this on a Vita, you might have a little bit of a harder time. What I would recommend is getting a chunky case, as weird as that sounds, because that allows you to control it a little bit better. Just go ahead and throw that thing in the dumpster where it belongs, turn our FCS back on. It automatically does that, by the way. That's not a feature. But there you go. So definitely do not try those things. So that's going to be kind of your basic intro to AC3. I mean, you do missions, you see what needs to be improved, you improve the thing, you get stuff. I'm not going to read that email because it's a little bit of a spoiler. You probably will have already found it by this point. Honestly, I think most folks really like the arena. I personally just always start off runs with the arena. But there you go. So it's kind of the basic mechanics of what you need to know going into this thing, and that's about the entire game. Just think of it as a fighting game or like a Dark Souls game or whatever else, because the mechanics are very similar. You have very specific hitboxes based on everything that you're currently using. Your entire unit is made to be entirely modular, so just adjust for what seems fair. Early on, you may want to just adjust to give yourself an advantage. Later on, once you get good at the thing, you'll probably want to adjust it to give yourself a disadvantage. So that's what makes these games pretty fantastic. Let's go ahead and move on real quick. So the second game after this was Silent Line. Now, as far as new stuff that this one added, basically this one is just like, it's basically AC3, but there's more, right? It added only a couple of new mechanics. There's an AI arena where you can teach an AI to do certain things. You basically spar with the AI in the arena until it becomes competent. That takes an incredibly long time, so there's actually a better approach that's known as looking up Javelin's AI Arena. That is Mr. Javelin from the Raven's Nest community, who basically, well, the Raven's Nest Discord. It actually goes by a different name at this point, but point being, the guy made a crap load of AIs. So if you really want a extra arena mode and whatever else, just look those up, give them a shot. Look at this entire thing as one big expansion for AC3. Because the story is similar, the overall mission structure is similar, the energy use and everything else is more forgiving in this one, and they actually added a whole bunch of like weird little side grade parts and whatever else, like hey, here's this one with less ammo, but it's functionally the same as this other weapon here, just all kinds of weird niche stuff. They did a bunch of experimental stuff, like this drone thing right here, and shell shields, so you had like solid metal shields you could slap on your arm. You got access to exceed orbit drones that fired guns instead of energy lasers and things like that. You had access to more left-hand weapons, though admittedly the mechanics were not quite refined in this one yet, so they basically still use the lock-on box of your right arm gun. And yeah, so the AI thing was a big part of it. The missions were way crazier in this one. So you had far longer missions, you had far crazier missions. This poor bastard dies in a second intro. They just couldn't get enough of killing that guy. But yeah, overall, it's a really fun one. I would say it's basically AC3, but they designed it while drunk. Like it's just pure on insanity for a lot of it. The music is kind of a remix of what was there before. And you get a bunch of cool stuff. Just so you know, by the way, and, geez, I think I overwrote my original saves with, yeah. Yeah, my my Vita's memory chip ended up corrupting itself a while ago, and so I think I just have only a selection of different community builds on here, and/or AI builds. Let's go with whatever this is. I forget who made these exactly. I don't think these were Javelin's ones. I think these might have been maybe Siphon or some such. No, actually, these do look like some of the ones that you fight for the AI arena. But point being, yeah, you've got more left-arm guns. They combine with the right-arm guns. You've got all kinds of different stuff you can do all over the place. You've got guns you can pop out of your cores, and you've got a few more customization options everywhere. The same system as before. You got missions, you got an arena, you have an extra arena. I didn't mention this for the first one. I wouldn't call it a spoiler, but basically it's a doubles arena. And the reason that I mention it for this one and not AC3 is because once you unlock this, you can actually use a clone of yourself using the AI, which is pretty fun. But yeah, that really about sums it up. It's more AC3, except it's just way crazier. So there's that. Now, 3 and Silent Line are probably my personal favorites from 3rd generation, so all 4 of these are going to be 3rd generation here. Now, the next one that's PSN exclusive right now, and the final one that's PSN exclusive at the moment, is going to be Last Raven. Now, what should be noted, Last Raven is not a direct sequel to 3 or Silent Line. It is a very different game. This actually skips 2 other games and technically 3 discs, like optional, I guess you could say 4 games. As you see, it's got part of the intro and whatever else. It's got a few bits from other intros that you haven't seen yet. And, yeah, it basically tells you, hey, all of that stuff is dead now. The world is over yet again. And honestly, out of context, this all seems very strange, because this is the aftermath of AC Nexus, which, yeah, there was no portable release for, because it probably would have been prohibitively huge to pull off, because that one also remade a bunch of missions from 1st Gen Armored Core. It ended up adding a bunch of stuff, yada yada. Plus Ninebreaker was kind of its own thing, plus technically it's unclear where Formula Front takes place. But okay, here's the general gist of this game. If you've played the Souls games, like specifically if you've played Dark Souls 1, and you've seen the Painted World, right? Now imagine if somebody took the Painted World and made it its entire game. That is Last Raven. See, this game assumes you have played every single other bit of the rest of the series. Everything is more exaggerated, there's a lot more mechanics, it's a lot less forgiving, and on top of that, the intro, as is tradition to the series, is a lot more misleading. So, basically, first off, this gun that he has right here, it does not do this. It does not do that at all. It doesn't even have that big an explosion effect, and it certainly does not explode like that. Anywho, so the general gist of Last Raven is it's got a branching storyline, it's got more customization, as you'd expect. If you can get the multiplayer working, it's certainly got the best, or at least the most balanced multiplayer. It is brutal in terms of difficulty. You can blow off limbs in this one, actually. It's a bit difficult to do, though it does make an interesting case for running a laser blade build, because you can just sort of run up and maybe take off one of somebody's gun with a couple slices or something. And yeah, the tone is overall darker. I mentioned the branching storyline thing before, because the plot is basically 24, where the entire game takes place over the course of 24 hours with a very, very, very branching plot line. Your actual missions will at most be about 12 missions, give or take. Whereas in the other ones, the standard was 50, but there are still that many missions in total. It's just kind of in a different order. The downside is, like I mentioned, the difficulty. There is not as much forgiveness for using the wrong build in the wrong situation in this. They actually even... Let's just go ahead and show the start right off the bat here. The music took a pretty drastic downturn on this one. It's... and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, you can convert save data from previous games to these. The sound, unlike the other 2 games, when you see the background music thing, you can go ahead and just set that to half. The music in this one is pretty dicey. It's actually the only game in the series that I legitimately don't like the music. Alright, let's go ahead and do this thing. So, I mentioned this earlier. but basically this one recaps what happened in Nexus, where pretty much somebody pissed off the Amazon drone hub library or whatever, and it just decided to blow up everything. So this is just kind of the final episode of Third Generation, so to speak. I would say, in my personal opinion, I like to see it as the second to final, because there was kind of a happy ending, potentially. But the thing is, yeah, comparing it with the other two, it's just night and day. So, I mean, the plot is the plot. You basically have corporations that survived, made an alliance. All the mercenaries that survived made their own alliance, and yeah. To give you an idea of how this all comes together, I mentioned before, every single mission will put you on a completely different path as far as stuff goes. You will have repeat missions through different playthroughs and stuff like that. But to give you an idea of just what you're looking at the start in terms of difficulty, this one you just basically go and you run over a bunch of props and that's your mission. This one you fight a few MTs, so those are those smaller robots, and that is your mission. Basically the starter mission that you would expect from the previous two games. And let's just take a look at what this does, right? Let's say you're new, you just got here, you took a look at this thing, you just figured you were supposed to go on a mission, you haven't looked at the garage yet, you don't know what makes anything good, and this is going to be the reason why you really don't want to start on this one. Definitely go through 3 and Silent Line first, and you'll probably hate this one anyway, but at least it'll make sense after a while. Like, this one was built entirely around people... Okay, this is entirely a product of its own kind of ecosystem. Because for around the time when this one was developed, a lot of folks were complaining that there weren't enough simulation elements, but then they tried to create... Okay, you see the little stagger there and how I took a little bit of damage? Yeah, so enemies that are dying nearby you self-destruct and cause a little bit of damage and stagger now. That can actually get you killed in this. It's like right here, boom. Yeah, that took 400 off. Not to mention, they kind of skipped the part as to why your core is downgraded. You may notice that core part looks a little bit different. There's a reason for that. It was kind of explained in Nexus that they were just being super cheap, and they decided to sell the standard core separately, and so the generic core was this thing instead, because they didn't want to pay for an overboost function anymore. Now, okay. Even knowing all of those enemies were there, and even dealing with them, and yes, I intentionally took a hit or two, you know, that is still a solid, I would say roughly, maybe, I don't know, 30% of our health gone before we open this door.
What took you so long?
Well, I hope you're ready for a boss fight. In your very first mission.
My orders are to kill you.
Against a guy with a gun that can blow your arm off in a single shot.
He's attacking. Take him out.
He hasn't used it yet, but if you see a bunch of blowy blue stuff, or bluey...
I thought you were
wow,
better than this.
blowy blue stuff. There we go. There's his LX cannon. He's also cheating, because you can't fire that thing while flying like that. Not on a biped, anyway. Additionally, there was a way for you to unlock those abilities in previous games. Even if you unlocked it, you do not get it here. Meaning that, yes, the AI is permanently at a advantage. Almost all of them have infinite energy. They use stuff in ways that you cannot hope to do. They will usually ambush you in the middle of missions. And I'm not saying this is BS. In the setting of this game, it does make sense. Like, as much as this seems like design bullcrap, this game is the end cap of the entire series. They should have telegraphed that better, sure. But it's, I mean, it is the end. It is, they say last Raven, they mean it. Whoever survives to the end of the game is the last one. Not even spoilers on that one. They do kind of mention in the intro that, like, yeah, no, nobody's making out of this. So, anywho, you can kind of see what I mean when I say don't start with those guys. It is very mean. It does have some easy routes through it, sure. But it is way more hardcore than the other ones, and it kind of loses a lot of that kind of arcadey fun vibe you got on, with the earlier ones, because it is far slower paced. There's a lot more cramped internal environments. There aren't as many cool encounters. I don't want to spoil anything from 3 and SL if you're just going into them, but like, for example, in Armored Core 1, there was this really cool moment where there was just a massive, like, citywide anthill underneath the city, and you're just going through and all you hear is just clicking noises because there's no music there. And, like, stuff like that. There's stuff like that throughout the entire rest of the series. This one kind of has its moments, but this one's more techno-horror, I would probably describe it. Because it's the end and everybody knows it. It is the final day, basically, of third generation. Alright, moving on. So there's 2 more that you can technically play on here. AC1, I mean, it's the original. It's the OG that started it all. I'm pretty sure most folks that have ever had a PlayStation probably played this at some point. Like, this is ye old clunky goodness. This is where it all started. The music is awesome. The setting is awesome. There is an arena, but you don't actually fight it normally until New Game Plus. And this one, that's actually something that started in AC2. So, actually no, it started in Master of Arena. So you had AC1, Project Phantasma, which was just an expansion with more story. And then you had Master of Arena, which was, like, people love the arena fights. I know personally the arena fights are my favorite part of the series, but the missions are pretty cool too. Oh shoot, right. Oh, I don't have that anymore. Dang it. Okay, whatever, we're just gonna do a new game real quick. Our name is nothing. So yeah, similar type setup. You can already see where AC3 came from because it is, in many ways, a rehash of what AC1 engaged. Did. You can kind of see the running theme already. You always start off with a missile, a rifle, and a blade. Oh shoot! Hold on, sorry. So the controls are okay. It's going to be functioning a bit weird because the controls are very different on this one. And since I'm on a Vita, I got to use the rear touchpad to be able to actually do stuff. But we will, at the very least, to get to the main menu, because this has the greatest main menu music you will ever hear in a game ever. It has never been topped. I don't think it ever will. But yeah, you're on the timer, and you're basically just told go fight dudes. And if you're wondering what happened with regards to the controls, you basically use the L2 and R2 for your camera. On the PSP ones, you use triangle and circle, which with the way the controller is laid out, sure, it doesn't have those 2 buttons, but I personally think that control scheme makes more sense anyway, because it allows you to quickly adjust your view and kind of lock it in place. Some people prefer the dual-step approach. For the way that aiming is handled in this game, I kind of feel like locking the thing in place is fine. In fact, I personally prefer it. But yeah, you can already see, it did not start off very easy. I've been through this a bunch of times and still ended up losing a third of my health to the first 2 enemies in the game.
From this moment on, you are a raven.
You became a bird! If you're interested, by the way, why on earth they call them ravens, it's not for the sake of it sounds edgy. Basically, the entire purpose of the AC unit is that it is, and why the first thing you see here is your core, is because it's essentially meant to be adaptable. The core is, as it says, the core of your entire thing. You slap legs, you slap arms, you slap a head on there, and it adapts to whatever situation. Basically, ravens in general are known for finding out, or finding good solutions to whatever they happen to run into. So anyway, it sounds cool, but, like, just listen to this music. Listen to this music. Is that not porn for your ears? It's such a good soundtrack in this game, and it just gets better and better and better and better. So, yeah, it's hard to do better than the original AC1 soundtrack. As far as overall structure in this one, it's quite a bit different. Okay, not that different. You basically just have missions, and then arena fights kind of just happen as missions. So your ranking goes up as time goes on. And you may have seen this guy before. He's kind of the mascot for the series. There's a ton of theories as to what exactly happened with the Hustler one. He's always back throughout the whole rest of the series. That's not really much of a spoiler. I'm sure if you've seen Armored Core, you've seen Hustler 1 before. Or specifically, you've seen the 9-Ball unit. Because 9-Ball is back. But, he is back many times. It's unclear what 9-Ball is. That's actually a large part of the premise of AC1 and Master of Arena. It's like, what the hell is 9-Ball? But anyway, so yeah, you do missions, you do mercenary stuff, the same kind of time and money calculations as before. It's where it all started. AC1 is an absolute classic. If you're playing it on a Vita, I would personally recommend remapping the controls to function like the PSP one. Just bear in mind that you will have overlapping controls, so this basically means that you would have to you would kind of have to do some weird maneuvers to get through menus sometimes. That's the only downside. But yeah, it's a fantastic game. Now, next is one that you actually probably will not be able to find in the PSN store ever, unless that whole emulation, buying for emulation thing ends up being true. Good God, I hope it is. I would gladly rebuy, or find a way to rebuy all of Armored Core and the Overbattle series. But okay, Formula Front. So here's the thing. Before we even get into it, you might notice it says International. You might have noticed that if you've seen a US copy of this, it's called Formula Front Extreme Battle. And aside from the fact that that name is objectively stupid as hell, what you really want to know about all of it is that, well, this is going to be an odd thing, but you want to pick up the international release. Because the international release is very different. The international version does come with English, but it's not just a language thing. It performs way better. If you've played Extreme Battle before, you may notice the fact that this is not taking several seconds between every single menu transition. You may notice that the music is better. You may notice that it looks better. It looks crisper, which, I mean, objectively it still looks bad, but still. And additionally, there's, I believe, about 50 extra arena fights. So it is an entirely better game in every way. You lose nothing by getting the international version. I don't actually know... Let me go Google that crap on eBay real quick, see how much international copies are. Because admittedly, this is going to be a rare game. As always, for something this unreasonable to find, I would probably say just go find a ROM site. I mean, say what you will about piracy and whatever else. The thing is, officially the law, as to my interpretation of it, admittedly I'm no lawyer, but as to my interpretation of reading over the thing several times, if something is unreasonable to attain by any means, and you have made every reasonable effort to do so, like, it's there as an option. So apparently by the way, fun little note I appreciate about this menu music is music from Armored Core Nexus, but it's redone in a sort of sports fashion. So that's just fun. Alright, so just went ahead and looked it up on eBay real quick. If you're looking for the UMD of this thing, you're basically looking at... Ooh. Oh my. You, sir, appear to be a $7 copy. Let's go ahead and snatch that up before anyone takes a look at this. Alright, sweet. That is not the best case, but nice. Anyway, you're looking anywhere from like $7 to $30 for a physical copy if you want the international version. The PSP other ones, the AC3P, Sideline P, and LRP never got physical releases to my knowledge. Actually, wait a minute. While I have it up, let me double check. Okay, so yeah, the only places where the portable games got a physical release are in Japanese. And it looks like those are running from like 10 to 40 bucks, and they're like 10 bucks on PSN, so yeah, get them suckers, because that's going to be way better. Also, interestingly, one of the, I think in Japan they might actually have had some different UMDs that they released. I've never really looked into this, but one of the listings I'm looking at here has like a friggin' clear case on there. Maybe they did make replacement cases for these. Yeah, you know what? Checking it further, they actually totally did make replacement cases. Man, I'm gonna have to... man, there's so much cool stuff to the PSP, I gotta say. Anyway, back on track. So, okay, what is this game? Now that we've gone from everywhere from eBay to just modding your UMD discs. So, the general idea of this one, it is still Armored Core. It's still the same way. However, you start off with all of your parts at the very start. You don't unlock them from missions or whatever else. What you do unlock over the course of the game is AI tuning chips. And you may notice I may use the wrong controls every now and then, because since this is the international release, it uses international control scheme, meaning that it uses circle for select and X for back. Now, the only parts that you actually unlock over the course of the game are going to be these operation chips. This basically means that you can tell your AC to do a particular thing. Now wait, why would you need to tell it to do a particular thing? Well, that's because this game is functionally battle bots with armored cores. You make your team of different mechs and you have them fight it out. At least that's how the multiplayer worked. In the single player, you have one AC, you fight the other AC. It would be incredibly cool to be able to use the 5v5 mode, and in fact, if you want to watch that, there's the VRGP, I think it's called, or something like that. I'll include a link in the description. But they actually brought the PS2 version of this game to life. They actually went ahead and they got a bunch of maps working. There were just kind of unfinished data in the game, and they got the multiplayer working, meaning that there is actually a multiplayer tournament scene out of Japan for this to this day. The last tournament I saw coming out of them was like a month ago. So yeah, they do those pretty regularly. It's a really, really fun game. Basic rules of how this works is, yeah, you have your standard AC building, same kind of stuff if you've played Last Raven, or if you're somebody that's been with the series, you've played AC Nexus. As this, technically speaking, on a parts level, takes place before Last Raven, but from a lore perspective kind of thing, it makes sense for it to take place after Last Raven, because this is basically, like, people have nothing better to do but just make war NASCAR with robots, so I kind of figure it's probably either pre-Nexus or post-Last Raven. Anyway, it's a very, like, there's no war, there's a few people being rival dicks and whatever else, but aside from that, it's just plain fun. There's no grimness to it whatsoever. The maps are pretty darn cool. But yeah, you can make whatever you want to make. You pick a map, you have them fight it out. In the single-player mode... Ooh, wait a minute, I haven't unlocked all the maps yet, right? Right, I keep forgetting that, but yeah, you've got remixes of old maps from previously in the series. I was hoping to show the Crest Base, because that's got my favorite music in this. It's got these sweet guitar riffs and whatever else, but oh well. And so, yeah, depending on the tendencies you give them, depending on the ranges you tell them to use, depending on your loadout, they'll end up performing differently. And if you're curious, yes, I do have a series of putting together almost every single Raven from the entire series and having them fight it out. And yes, if you're curious, Adieu did make it to the semifinals. It was amazing. I really should redub that entire thing, because admittedly the voiceover quality and everything else was pretty garbage. But anyway, you can see the AI is pretty competent. It does have its dumb moments, and funnily enough, most of those dumb moments are usually on account of your own settings, because you do have to sacrifice some stuff to make them work better. So, really neat game. I mean, if you have the means to try it, definitely try it. Certainly one of the more unique things that never really got to see the light of day. And you can do all kinds of cinematic cameras and things, and you've got a fast forward mode. I'm trying to find, darn it, I was trying to find the cinematic button. There's a way that you can go into sort of cinematic mode. Actually, let's see. And if you have original saves, you can actually load from that as well, though it's a little bit janky. So we got Pro Cow's team. I forget when this was from. Let's see, we got Not Gaudy here with a parry blade. Sure, this is like the only time the parry blades are ever justifiable. Aw, yeah, all my old saves are corrupted. It's not count of the Vita being the Vita, I suppose. Freaking default chips are such crap. I'm not really hating on it. I love the Vita as a general thing, but like the save chips that Sony put out are really bad. I mean, I've had two different ones that have corrupted themselves in weird ways. And then let's go ahead and whatever, we'll do the range. sure. And I should mention, by the way, that site I was mentioning about, those people that were doing the tournaments, all of their codes for different unlocks for both versions of this game are actually available online. So if you are running an emulator, or if you're running a modded Vita or PSP with cheats enabled, stuff like that, you can have really cool stuff happen. So, for example, if we were to take this thing right here, and we were to go over to the cheats. Sorry, I'm already adjusted to a different control scheme. Switch over to cinematic mode real quick. It's going to keep throwing me off. So let's go to the cheats, and let's say we wanted them to triple fire certain weapons. Let's say we wanted them to fire certain weapons out of the wrong things. Say we wanted them to go fly around faster and we just turned all that crap on. How would that end up happening? I don't think it actually will take effect in this fight, but should be able to have a repeat fight. That should be pretty darn interesting. But you can see how this can be really good fun. And you might be saying, wait a minute, if the multiplayer doesn't work in the PSP version, why would I bother? There's still a lot of fun to be had in the PSP version. That entire tournament I did, that weird theoretical tournament and whatever else, was on the PSP version. I have not gotten the PS2 one working. Armored Core emulation for the PS2 takes a really good computer. I don't know what it is exactly about them that makes them so dang hard to run, but they will lag like crazy so much of the time that it's not even funny. That's why, I mean, I would probably submit a few teams for the Japanese tournament, and I've wanted to in the past, but never quite got around to it. They always ended up starting before I could get it running again, because even finding a ROM for that PS2 version it's an adventure. You're going to be at that for a while. So yeah. Now let's go ahead and see what something like this looks like. Let's see who's got an interesting back part. I think that this one does. Actually, no, this one. So this guy should now have a machine gun made of missiles. So, and they did actually do a tournament of this one time where I think one of the cheats was like you use your inside weapon as your main weapon. So somebody had a spread machine gun made of floating mines. It was just great. But yeah, that's kind of, you know, you get the general gist of why somebody might like this series getting into it. So yeah, machine gun missiles, there you go. Is this normal? Is this recommended for new players? I don't know, but you may find it really good fun. But, Starter AC showing how it's done over here. Let's get the cinematic camera going, and you've got a ton of maps for this one too. The international version had a ton of extra maps. I will say, if you're playing this version, if you ever have a hard time, if you ever just want to make progress, just put napalm rockets on something. A lot of the times the AI does not know how to deal with napalm. But, you know, little limitations. It's one of those things that actually is not broken once you start playing multiplayer like this. It's one of the reasons there's a limitation on one unique part for each AC, meaning that nobody's allowed to share any parts. So you do get some really janky looking builds, which is what makes this whole system so fun, and why it's a bit tragic that you can't play multiplayer on it, or at least on the PSP version. Or, I mean, you can, but it's only ad hoc. Funnily enough, I've gotten them to connect before, but it says stuff in Japanese, so I don't quite know how that works. And in fact, I wonder if I have the original disc version, if it'll connect better. Well, I mean, I'll know soon. With DMD prices going up, there's no way I'm missing out on something that rare. Anyway, so that's about the series in a nutshell, at least on the PSP side of things. So, I hope this was helpful to some folks. Again, I would really recommend starting with AC3. It's definitely the easiest to get into. Like AC3 and AC1. Like AC1 can be kind of hard, but AC3 is a really solid, really well-balanced, just excellent entry into the series. Silent Line is more of the same. Probably one of the best cases where the devs just looked at feedback and were like, hey, people want exactly more of the same thing. Let's just do that. So they did. So Silent Line is really good fun. That's actually the one that you can create situations where your defense is so high that you can literally take one damage from stuff. But yeah, it's a series that you basically play around with Legos. What can I say? It's the robots, it's Legos, it's every little boy's dream here. And when you grow up, it's good nostalgia. So, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff. This might have just been a nostalgic gush, but either way, have yourselves a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time.